throughout history, it's very easy for people to be turned against an out group, an outsider group, a group that looks different, maybe sounds different, and can be portrayed as a threat. So people arriving on boats is dominates our conversation about immigration, and people seeking asylum dominates our conversation about immigration. That's actually a very small proportion. A lot of what Labour's doing is re-announcing existing policies in language that makes it sound really tough, and is more about looking busy and trying to keep their, tough competition with reform on the front pages. We know what drives crime. We know what causes crime. It's poverty, social deprivation, it's cycles of addiction and abuse. It isn't your ethnicity, it isn't your nationality. I don't have polite words to express my feelings towards it. The throwing migrants under the bus, completely abandoning any principle that they ever had, they're despicable. And I hope that nobody with progressive politics ever votes for them again.
Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. I think we should probably kick things off with maybe you giving us a little overview of who you are, sort of your area of expertise and the work that you're doing.
So hi, my name is Zoe Gardner. I am a researcher and a campaigner for the rights of all migrants and all refugees. I'm independent freelancer at the moment. I've previously worked for a lot of different NGOs and charities that support asylum seekers and migrants, both based in the UK and looking sort of more broadly across Europe.
Obviously, I would imagine you've been following the local elections and sort of Reform's landslide victory, if you can call it that. I'm sort of wondering if we can get your thoughts on why immigration, a national issue like immigration, is so effective at the ballot.
I think it's a combination of things. One is it's tale as old as time. We all know it. Throughout history, it's very easy for people to be turned against an out group, an outsider group, a group that looks different, maybe sounds different, and can be portrayed as a threat. And that's happened throughout our history. It happened to Jewish immigrants when they came here fleeing pogroms across Eastern Europe at the start of the 20th century. It happened to the migrants from the Commonwealth who came after the Second World War to help us rebuild the NHS. And at the current time, the scapegoat chosen by the elite forces driving this are asylum seekers and specifically Muslim migrants. So that's one side, is that it's always been a tried and true tactic to create a common enemy, especially in times when the government is failing to provide adequate services for the citizens of the country. I think the other side to the particular rise we're seeing in this issue at the moment is specifically money. There is a huge amount of money. I mean, like really like massive funds being pumped internationally into promoting this agenda of the far right globally. Yeah. So that we can see in Donald Trump, obviously. We can see in how Nigel Farage is chummed up with the likes of Elon Musk. He gets funding from a whole bunch of different billionaires. We have various media channels that are owned by and funded by far right billionaires promoting this far right agenda. We don't have enough independent great media like Byline's to counteract that, and so I think that it's a combination of it being a scapegoat that has always traditionally worked, and also the fact that right now, why is the left on the back foot? Why is the far right on the ascendant? Well, they are pumping huge amounts of funds into promoting that agenda, and so it's all we hear.
In your view, what are the most glaring misconceptions around immigration that you think your sort of average member of the electorate would fall victim to?
I'm going to try to think of maybe three.
Yeah, perfect.
So number one, I would say, I think people vastly overestimate the number of people who are coming here irregularly. So people arriving on boats is dominates our conversation about immigration, and people seeking asylum dominates our conversation about immigration. That's actually a very small proportion of immigration to the country. So people coming on boats last year made up about 5% of immigration, and overall people seeking asylum are under 10%. Um, but we focus on that group because when we start talking about the vast majority of immigrants, it's much more difficult to provoke that hatred and that scapegoating feeling, because the vast majority of immigrants are coming here and working actually in public services mostly. So they're working in the NHS, they're working in social care, and they're they're teachers. All these things that people just don't feel as scared of, and as threatened by. So there's deliberately pushed this idea that that we're only going to talk about this small minority of immigration that people feel more threatened by. I think focusing in on that group that we speak about the most, another big misconception is that it's all young men. And actually, there is a majority of men, but it's a small majority. So last year in 2024 in the UK, the asylum applications were made 59% by men, and the rest of them, so almost half of them, by women and children. And then actually it completely balances out when you take into account family reunion. So once a person has been recognized as a refugee, they have the right to bring their immediate family to join them. And 99% of people who come through family reunion are women and children. So if you take that into account, we actually have a totally balanced immigration of asylum seekers and refugees, as regards men and women. But the media deliberately only shows images of men. And it is true that you can easily find an image of a boat in the channel with only men on it, because the journeys are so dangerous, and especially the boat journeys on the channel are so dangerous that it's more likely that men will take those journeys than women and children who are more vulnerable. But overall, our immigration system, and this goes across the board, our immigration system is more or less balanced between women and men. And that goes for the asylum system as well, and for refugees as well. And then I'd say maybe the third misconception, that it's important to, there's so many.
I can
I guess
imagine. I can imagine.
I guess we could say, like, I think yeah, this is a really big one. People talk about, like, politicians talk about controlling immigration, right? And that is understood in terms of the numbers, but it's not actually about the numbers, because and I'm sure we'll get to this in the interview, we have such a great need for migrant labor in this country that there's no politician who could actually very, very significantly reduce immigrant numbers without causing drastic damage to our economy. So when they talk about control, what they actually enact, the policies they enact, do not reduce numbers. They reduce the rights of the people who do come here anyway and who continue to do the work. We have reduced the rights of migrant care workers. We have reduced the rights of migrant doctors. We have reduced the rights of asylum seekers and refugees. We reduce their rights. We don't reduce the numbers because we still need those people, and those people still need to come here. So when we have this narrative about control, they're trying to make you think that we can reduce numbers. In reality, we're just reducing people's rights, and that creates a two-tier system of rights where everybody is more easily exploited by the rich.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially in a time where Labour have pledged to build 1.5 million houses in the UK, and we've got a drastic shortage of builders.
And of course, it sounds counterintuitive because you hear, oh, well, we need 250,000 more builders to come in to build the houses. And then you think, oh, well, those people need houses and it will just continue forever. But the real reason why we have fewer houses is obviously we've not been building sufficient housing stock for a really, really long time. But also our population has got older and older. So a great thing, we live for longer and longer. Well, guess what people need, as long as they're still alive, is a house. And more and more people live on their own, more and more families are split up. So that means 2 houses, 3 houses, where it used to be just one for a family unit, and those people are living longer. That's actually what's using up far more housing, and we're not building enough to make up for that. It's not actually, immigration is one factor, but it's not the major factor impacting housing.
So, I mean, are there ever legitimate concerns about immigration and refugees, coming to seek asylum in this country? Is it a question of resources or?
So I've always found it funny when people say, "Oh, you can't talk about immigration." Firstly, we do nothing but talk about immigration.
Yeah.
Or they say you can't talk about immigration without being called racist. I do nothing but talk about immigration. I'm never called racist. And the truth is, of course, we desperately need to have a conversation about how to better manage our immigration system.
Mm.
It is a total mess from start to finish. Every single part of it is in a disastrous situation, and that good systems can manage lots of people well without problem. Bad systems create huge problems, even with small numbers of people.
Mm.
And we have bad systems. So immigration in those bad systems is causing problems.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And it is good and right that we should be able to talk about it. Unfortunately, the debate has been hijacked by people who really are using it for racist and xenophobic purposes.
Mm.
So I do think that it's good to talk about immigration, but when you mentioned resources there, immigration is not a strain on resources because people create resources as well as using them.
Mm.
So people work like with the people we were talking about who would come and work in construction. We need 250,000 people to come and work in construction. They they'll be building houses as well as living in houses. They will be buying and employing people to build houses. They will be buying the materials. That means more employment and jobs. They will be shopping in our shops. They will be renting homes in our rental market. Like people produce and create as well as consuming. And so it's not sort of one in, one out in the economy. People create much more than they take away.
What do you think of Labour's plans to tackle immigration? Are there any particular policies or steps that you would like to see? Or I'd imagine those things are worlds apart.
Um, so a lot of what Labour's doing is re-announcing existing policies in language that makes it sound really tough, and is more about looking busy and trying to keep their, you know, tough competition with reform on the front pages rather than it is about really doing anything or actually fixing any of the immigration systems we have. One of the things they're doing that's really harmful though is I think when we talk about systems that are bad and that can make immigration a problem just because the systems don't work well.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we have with immigration in this country is that everybody comes on a short-term visa. And that means that they come for a short while and then they have to leave again, or it's incredibly expensive and difficult to renew their leave and to then stay long enough to qualify for indefinite leave to remain or for citizenship. And that creates churn in our communities. And it's one of the things that people really don't like. Like people really want to feel like they know their neighbors. That's a pretty universal thing that people want throughout our country. They want to know their neighbors. They want to feel like they're in a community that feels coherent and cohesive. And if we move towards a system that let migrants settle more easily in the country and said that once you have fulfilled the criteria to enter this country, you have the right to live here and to settle down for the long term, then we would eliminate that churn and we would create more integrated communities, people with more equal rights, people whose, you know, kids can grow up and go to school in our schools alongside our kids and become British, right? Which is actually what people want out of our immigration system. But because they're so desperate to look like they're being tough, Labour is moving towards making it harder and harder to settle here for the long term for immigrants. And so that's actually creating a worse outcome that will make people feel more negatively towards immigration. And it's everything that the Labour government is currently doing is exactly the wrong thing.
You know, more to that kind of alienation of migrants and you know, refugees. I wanted to get your thoughts on the foreign national crime statistics. What you think that entails?
So I think, listen, the truth about crime is that we know what drives crime. We know what causes crime. It's poverty, social deprivation, it's cycles of addiction and abuse. It isn't your ethnicity, it isn't your nationality, it isn't the color of your skin or your religion. That's not what causes crime. What causes crime is social exclusion and poverty. So anybody who is trying to sell you a solution to crime that isn't about addressing poverty and social exclusion is selling you a false narrative, a dream, a fake. And I think it's really dangerous, this focus on migration around crime, because what it does is it just puts a scapegoat in the way of what we really need to be doing to keep our communities safer, which is about addressing this social exclusion. It's about addressing the real social determinants of crime. And I think as long as we have this incredibly reactive response, and we have a totally disproportionate coverage of crime when it's committed by somebody from a migrant background. So, for example, there was a horrendous case a year or so ago of a man who had gone through the asylum system and he perpetrated an acid attack. It was awful. He threw acid into the face of a woman and a child. And we had front page news about that for a week and a half. Um, and we still talk about it. It was actually referenced on the radio by the Home Secretary just the other day. And so I looked into the statistics, and there had been 1,200 acid attacks in the year preceding that one. And there was absolutely no correlation whatsoever between ethnicity or nationality or anything like that. In fact, it's a crime most often associated with white gang violence. Um, so we had no reporting whatsoever. I had not heard a single report about any of those 1,200 previous cases of acid attacks in the year before. So like, maybe crime committed by an immigrant is more newsworthy for some reason, but is it really 1,200 times more newsworthy than crime committed by a white British person? I don't believe that it truly is. This is what I say with the media is twisting the narrative and it produces these racist and xenophobic responses, but it doesn't actually reflect the reality. And publishing a list of criminals by nationality is just another way to feed into that circus that doesn't keep anybody safe from crime.
Are there any particular steps or policies that you would like to see? And also, maybe a little bit of an extension to that, is there anyone that's actually doing it right in politics at the moment? Are there any parties that you're particularly a fan of in this regard?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's three policies that I would put in place tomorrow, right? One is a sensible and humane, realistic approach at the border. So that means regulated, safe routes for people to access the asylum system so that they don't take small boats, so that they're not paying smugglers to make those dangerous journeys. Two would be to address our immigration work system. So our current immigration work system is a sponsorship model. So a migrant comes here and they can only work for the specific employer who has sponsored their visa. That means that if they annoy their boss, they can not just be sacked, but lose their right to live in the country by being sacked. So they're in the power balance between them and their boss is completely out of kilter. And that creates a two-tier workforce. So I would scrap that and have a points-based system where anybody, no matter where they were born, has equal and fair access to the labor market. And then finally, I would have a policy on integration. So I would say that after anybody who has been living in this country for 5 years, if they intend to stay here, they should have the right to settle permanently, and that should be the cost of obtaining that visa to stay here permanently should be reflect the cost of administering it. So at the moment, we charge people thousands, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to make that application to stay permanently in the UK. And that means people stay, on these temporary status for the long term. So I would make it possible to integrate much faster. And there are several political parties that advocate for that, actually. So Liberal Democrats have decent immigration policies, particularly towards refugees. They want to let asylum seekers work. They want to have safe routes to reach us. That's really good. The Green Party has excellent immigration policies, really, really good immigration policies. They want to do away with immigration detention when it's not about keeping our communities safe. They want to scrap the hostile environment that is what caused the Windrush scandal. They want, it's really positive immigration policy. Also, the regional parties, Plaid Cymru has excellent immigration policies. SNP has good immigration policies. And there's actually like a huge number of people in the UK who voted for those parties or who voted for Labour thinking that they wouldn't be such a hostile party towards immigration. And there's a huge amount of support for more sensible and more humane immigration systems in the UK.
these moves towards, for example, the foreign national crime statistics and tackling immigration, taking a harder stance on it all, is that something that you think is actually at the core of what Labour wants to achieve, or is that just like a politically calculated, cynical move to maybe capture some voters that they're probably never going to capture?
It's pure cynicism, isn't it? I mean, a really good example is Labour have removed the right for refugees, no matter how long they live in the country, no matter if they have kids here, live here for the rest of their life, to obtain citizenship if they entered the UK through irregular means. I mean, please show me the Labour MP who wanted to get into power in order to deny access to citizenship for refugees. There isn't one. These are people who have sold their soul. They have sold their soul because they're so scared of Nigel Farage. And it is the most contemptuous, low. I don't have polite words to express my feelings towards it. The throwing migrants under the bus, completely abandoning any principle that they ever had. They're despicable. And I hope that nobody with progressive politics ever votes for them again.
Well said. Where can people find, more of your work, and is there anything you particularly like to promote coming up?
Yeah, so I mean, I tweet and YouTube and TikTok and Blue Sky, all of that. And if you search for Zoe Gardner or Zoe Jardinière, you should find me. Um, I'd like to promote the work of a brilliant charity called Praxis. They're based in London. They support destitute and homeless asylum seekers and migrants. If you're looking for somewhere to donate to push back against the awful, horrendous political time we're in, then there'd be a good one. Also, I'm doing some work with the UK Stop Trump Coalition, and we're organising a big demonstration for whenever Donald Trump comes to visit the UK. So search for UK Stop Trump and join us and come and protest because Trump is the leader of this global far right movement that is definitely visible on our streets in the UK as well.